Hey everyone, R. Sean McBride. Welcome to another Best in Events show. I am doing a series with my co-host Deirdre Watson, and we're focusing on what we're seeing in the events industry, what's happening, and really how do we get from where we are now with COVID-19, disruption, change, to what the future is. And part of this is learning what the future is, and part of it is how do we build the bridges from here to there. So Dana Salas agreed to join us today and provide some of her expertise. Dana, why don't you just give us a quick intro to who you are, what you've been doing, and then we'll
Sure.
jump to questions about what we're seeing and where we're headed.
All right. I have been in association management for 34 years. I started as a meeting professional and planned for associations for several years. And then in 2000, I went independent and I planned on contract for a variety of associations. And then a couple of years ago, I retired from meeting planning and am now consulting to associations about their meetings and their governance models. So I'm still intimately connected to associations.
So you're at the center of it right now, right? So everything's starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, why don't we just start with that? I mean, so what is the feedback you're getting on the ground, right? I think all of us have some ideas of what might be going in the association world. What are people actually saying that they're seeing, and what are they worried about?
Well, they're worried about a lot of things, but primarily it is about the money. And from two perspectives. One is paying cancellation fees and any other fees associated with not being able to hold a meeting.
Yeah.
But also the loss of income clearly from not having the meetings, but if the attendance is lesser than expected. That's the money is one thing, but the other thing is, in fact, I was just consulting with a planner this morning what to do. It's really still, we're really still at the very beginning stages of trying to figure out what the best next step is. Now, for the meetings that were scheduled for spring and summer, those decisions were a little bit easier because they clearly couldn't meet. Yeah. We're now looking at September meetings, for example, and do we hold them? Do we not hold them? And if we hold them, who will come?
Yeah, and I think that's an open question, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people throughout the economy is, not just the meeting sector, but everybody. It's, when do we start to go back to some sense of normal or the way it used to be, and what does that look like, and does it look different than before?
Yeah, and I'll say that, and I thought about this, is that we will not be returning to normal, Sean and Deirdre. No. It's not going to happen. And the sooner that each of us recognizes that, the sooner we can start creating a new normal, a new plan. I have had a couple of discussions, virtual discussions with meeting professionals about what you need to start thinking about, how to think about what you need to think about. So no answers, just, for example, the primary question I always pose is, what's your objective? So if you're meeting an objective, you're meeting an objective pre-COVID, is that still applicable post-COVID? And what does that mean?
Well, and it really at this point, for any event planner, corporation, association, it is reassessing what that model looks like and thinking strategically on a totally different level than we have in the past.
Right. And not only the model, and I'm going to interpret, Deirdre, model meaning the structure of it, but also the content. So I have an engagement with an association to speak in July, and I received an email this week that said, we are reevaluating. I can't promise that you're still going to be on the agenda because the content may need to change. Yeah. And they're going to try to reappropriate our skill set and our expertise in different ways. And I said, absolutely. I'm glad that you're saying that because last year's meeting is not this year's meeting.
No.
Right. And I think one thing Deirdre and I we've done this series of interviews now.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's on a YouTube channel called Best in Events. It's also on my Arshon McBride Facebook page. Feel free to check it out. But one thing we keep hitting upon, it seems like regardless of which direction you go with this, the cost structure is going to be completely different and
Mm-hmm.
largely more expensive than it used to be, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what you're doing, you need to space people out more, need to have more controls, maybe need to take people's temperatures as they come in there, think about how people are coming and going from the event, do your evening dinners differently, everything, or maybe split your event up regionally. So it's
Mm-hmm.
cost, which means for a lot of associations that are, breaking even or, just, their event is one time a year and they make the money and they fund their association for the year off that, your whole budget and your whole process has changed now, right, Dana?
Yeah, it has. And it's, you have to, the whole thing is about thinking differently. And so thinking about now, like I said, thinking about the future is going to make a big difference, and creating scenarios that you might not have ever thought about, including ways to recoup those lost incomes, those lost revenue sources, and being creative with sponsorships. Okay, so you're not going to sponsor the annual banquet anymore. What does that mean? What could you sponsor? What could you create for a sponsor now? And so that identifying new revenue sources is going to be really important, because like I said, the events aren't going to come back like they were, and some may grow. There may be some industries where they really need to come back together, but I'm going to predict that for the most part, attendance is going to be lower than historic records would indicate, because people are going to have less money. They're going to be more stressed about traveling, and they're going to be spending so much time recouping from this, especially for 2020 events that do happen.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my big thing is creativity. Think, and use our resources of other planners, other suppliers, and everybody to leverage and say, what could we do?
Right. I think it's a great time to get that creativity box out. And, so that kind of leads to the next question or thought is, how do you keep everybody engaged, right? So, I mean, for so many associations and so many events, the event is a center of engagement. That's why we do live events. So how do you keep everybody, around the cause, engaged, talking to each other? Any recommendations or ideas for what people could do, at least as a bridge until their event comes back?
I do. And in short is to keep communicating and keep serving. Associations right now are struggling. Many are struggling mightily just to stay afloat, just to exist post pandemic. But the ones that are going to be most successful are the ones who stay in a communication with their members, and this includes all members, suppliers, and all that, and say, here's what we're doing for you in this time. And let me look at some notes, because I participated in a webinar sponsored by the Association Society Alliance, and those are the executive directors of the SAEs around the country, Society of Association Executives. And it was just last week, adding member value in time of COVID-19, and 14 associations volunteered to share their best practices. And there is a lot of great ideas. And the ones that I liked the most were the ones that spoke to identifying what's most important now, and then not dumping, but putting aside everything else for the time being. So for example, what the South Carolina Asphalt Pavement Association said, number one, they identified the core services to the members. So the core services, what you need to retain. That may or may not be a meeting. I don't know. And then their number two, and this is going to be appropriate for a lot of associations, they began immediately communicating with the governor's office to ensure members are identified as essential services. Okay, so asphalt pavement, right? For other associations, it might be something else. Nursing homes are struggling. I used to work for the Illinois Healthcare Association. nursing homes. Oh my gosh, you guys. And then for them, for the Asphalt Association, is they wrote a joint workforce COVID-19 safety plan.
Oh, good for them.
With South Carolina DOT. So they're, right now, they turned into an advocate for their members in this time. Okay, so that's the immediate response. And that was not unique. There were several that did that. And that's what I appreciated a lot. And so if you start with, what do we need to do for our members at this moment? And then looking at the meeting. I know people are so scared. This one planner I consulted with this morning, like I mentioned, their executive committee is really resistant to canceling their September 20 meeting,
Right.
20th through 23rd, something like that. And it's hemorrhaging money. And so what I recommended to her, and I recommend to all people who are looking at numbers, is to create a scenario of the cost of canceling the meeting, okay? And then on the other side, the cost of having a meeting with significantly lower participation.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
and the key point in this is that in both cases, you need to include the value of the planner and his or her team in canceling or planning. Okay. So a planner who has to continue planning the meeting, or has the privilege of continue planning the meeting, either way you look at it, like we were just saying, and your other interviews have indicated, you have so many extra things to do. Just even if it's how to wash hands and make sure everybody's clean.
Right.
There's so many, you have to rewrite marketing messages, and you have to redesign content in some cases. Whereas
and research too, right? I mean, it's
all of it.
I think a lot of
All of
people probably watching this live know, you're spending a lot of time just researching and knowing what you need to know about.
And praying that you don't make a mistake in contracting and recontracting, like Heather Reed spoke with you last week, and that's just scary in itself. But then so if the cancellation seems to be more, would have better benefit on the bottom line, the benefit to the association is that the planner and his or her team now have time to come up with alternative sources of income that are more viable and more realistic.
Yes.
All right. So if they're trying to plan a convention, actually, in some cases, replan a convention,
right,
there's no time for creativity and for doing outside the box things.
Now, do you think, especially for the national associations, that they will look at doing maybe more regional events as opposed to like a big, huge national event?
Sure. So once again, it all goes back to objectives and what is the purpose of this meeting. It has to start with that. If the primary purpose above everything else is to get everybody from across the country in one spot, and that's the most important part, then yes, they're going to want to continue to do that. But if the purpose is to ensure that their professionals get their continuing education credits, that could look like a lot of different things, including regionals or virtual or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. The other thing too is that what we cannot forget, and especially with associations, is to identify, don't guess, don't let the board make this decision by itself, but to ask the members, what do you want? What do you want? When do you want to come back? If we go ahead and plan this September meeting, are you going to come back? Are you going to have the resources to send people?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point. This may be a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? Because I think all of us have experimented with surveys. It's often hard to get people to fill out surveys, but everybody knows this is massive and this is monumental. So this may be a one in a lifetime opportunity to actually reach out to your members, reach out to the people you serve and say, hey, what do you want? What do you need?
Yeah, I was just speaking with someone yesterday about that very same thing, and it's a member-driven organization. It's not an association, but a member-driven organization. And we were talking about their AGM and also their website and everything. And I said, do a survey. It's so important because at least you get some research on what they're really looking for. And
Right.
even if you get 100 out of your 3,000, it's still giving you a base to go with on what they're expecting.
Yeah, it may actually also, before you even do the survey, it might be a great opportunity to just pick up the phone and talk to people, right? Because, one thing, shaping a survey, right, you need to know what to ask and what you need to get in there. So before you get too deep in the survey, actually call people and get some verbal information. Then you can use that to shape something bigger if you need it.
What I would do in that case, Sean, I would recommend that the board of directors make the phone calls to get a feel for how the association members are processing and feeling and thinking, and use that as an opportunity for some good PR.
Yeah, exactly. What a fantastic PR relationship building, right? And if
right.
I think most members would be pleased to get a call from a board member that actually wants to talk to somebody here from.
Right. But as far as the survey goes, I think that planners know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
The one question I recommend you avoid is, would you attend this event? Okay. Because you need to ask something along the lines of, on September 20th, do you anticipate having the resources, meaning money, to travel to and participate in this? And will you be able to let staff leave your, whatever, facility, office, business to come and attend for 2.5 days or whatever?
Right.
Okay. And then if then, so if no, would you be able to do it for 1 day, So you'd want your meeting planning team to brainstorm in advance options that are reasonable for the association to fulfill, and then ask questions that ask the members to give honest input about whether they would actually pay and go. You have to ask that question. That, would you attend? Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, Deidre, one more thing.
No,
as you said, for national associations, that's an even bigger ask, because we're talking about airplanes. For state associations, that's going to be an easier ask.
Well, yeah, and I was just talking to somebody who's in a management position, and they're like, there's something in July, and they're like, I don't know, I can't even plan for July right now because I don't know where things will be, right? And September's a little farther from July, but I got to imagine a lot of people are in that boat where they're saying, hey, I just don't know where the world's going to be. I don't know if people are going to be getting on airplanes. I don't know. And so for him, he's like, people are asking him to possibly travel in July, and he's like, I just can't say yes or no.
Sorry, go ahead, Dana.
No, I was just going to say, I learned yesterday, and many of you already know this, but the governor of Virginia has stay at home till June 10th.
And we're in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
We're Ontario, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Our premier has stated, because I think we were to the end of April, now we're another 28 days after that, and I really think it's going to be end of June as well. That's when we can actually start kind of looking at getting back into doing things. And in regards to the travel, if you've got somebody that can drive 2.5 hours or 4 hours to go to a conference, they may do that. They're not going to get on a plane right away.
Not everybody. Yeah.
Not everybody.
Yeah. And that goes back even to the 1-day events. People might be more comfortable to drive in and out.
Yeah.
So, Illinois is bigger than Chicago, and it's a very long state. And so you can't drive in and out for a lot of things, but there's opportunities for states and regional meetings to create a model that allows people to be as comfortable as possible under whatever sanitation guidelines we come up with.
Yeah, and that's the thing I keep seeing now in the talk is, what are the sanitation guidelines, and how does that allow us to re-engage? And I guess the good thing for people planning events is, at least sounds like in the US, there's going to be some experimentation in the next month or two with allowing people to get out and start doing things, and then we'll see what works and what doesn't work. And so that will inform, I guess, people in the fall what sanitation they need. But the problem is you won't know probably till July or August what the norms need to be for an event potentially in September or October. So you may have to make a lot of switches at the last minute.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've been talking to planners about is that it's not only going to be sufficient to ensure that sanitation is, up to par, but that the perception of sanitation is
Exactly.
there,
That's right.
So we can say that, yes, housekeeping has done a fabulous job, but how are we going to ensure or prove to guests at any level, even walking into the hotel, into sleeping at a hotel, which is inherently a lot of shared stuff anyway,
Yes.
walking into the convention center, how are we going to share assure them in a way that they believe it as well as can see it? And I think that part of it is going to be land in the hands of the planners. So that's, add to the list of all the things you need to do in addition to planning a convention post-COVID. It would be creating that message. How are you going to prove that,
Yeah, and I think attendees may be expecting that as part of the communication, right? Is here's our plan, here's what we're doing to manage risk, spacing, cleaning. I mean, these are the types of things that probably were never addressed in any of your outgoing communication, which are now going to be part and parcel of saying, hey, come back.
Right.
We're not going to crowd you all in a ballroom. We're not going to, we're going to do things to minimize risk, whatever that may be. And we're going to have people come out and clean. I know in the retail industry, they're actually having third-party like sanitation people come out and verify their work, right? There's sanitizing overnight, and they have a third party come out and say, okay, it was sanitized properly.
And
so
I think sorry, I was just going to say, and I think with site checks and venues, it's going to change how we do our site checks.
Yeah.
And how our contracts are written.
That flows back to your Heather Reed contracts. I was about to say that, hey, you're going to clean the place, and I'm going to bring my third-party verification person in the morning, and they're going to make sure it's sanitized. And if it's not, you're going to rework it or whatever.
Yeah. We're going to have black lights are going to be in the every meeting planner kit from now on.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just think association and what you said about the cleanliness. I want to look up the Cleaning Association of America and say, you have the opportunity to create a whole new program called Certified Cleanliness Certificate.
Deirdre, I'm friends with somebody who runs a huge cleaning business. We should
interesting that you say that, because I used to work for the Cleaning, Flooring and Restoration Association of Canada. So they're members of the IIRC. So I should, what? I should contact them,
they should sell branded black lights or whatever to check for germs, but then I don't know if I want to see all that, but anyway,
you don't really want to see
that.
We'll do a sub segment on cleaning. So.
Yeah, exactly. So Dana, let me ask you another question. PCMA just released an article on the ASAE calling Congress to help associations. Do you want to speak a little bit to that? Because I know we had a brief conversation.
Yeah, so this is great because those of us who are association professionals, we really know that associations are behind almost everything that we do as people, right? There's an association for everything. And we just make a difference in the world on many levels. A big part of that for associations is that we have our conventions, our meetings, and where we do all the things that all meetings do, right? But in addition to the connecting and stuff, we create policy, we create standards that make our world better. But also, we bring a lot of money into the world just by having meetings. And I thought of this early on, and I was on a webinar yesterday, I believe, that if meetings were invested in, that is one of the economic triggers, one of the economic drivers of our country is having meetings. So, you think about it, when what was it, was it the Restaurant Association that pulled out of Chicago and the McCormick Place? I mean, like $56 bazillion or something, right? That's gone from the city. So even the small associations that bring in, 500,000 to a mid-tier city, it's important. And so ASAE did their due diligence, and they are lobbying Congress to provide additional relief for associations affected by COVID-19. And they are asking for $25 billion in aid for associations that face financial losses from canceled conferences and events. And there's more to it, but that's the key point. The other, that's the ask. The point that just for, once again, us associations, that's frustrating is that when these people have been lobbying Congress, they have come across the misconception that 501c6 associations' primary function is to lobby the government. Okay, so in the United States, 501c6 are trade and professional associations. The ones that that lobby primarily are C4s. Okay, so because of that, there's a misperception that the associations don't need the money, and we do. And then finally it says, additionally, the $2.2 trillion CARES Act excludes associations from the Paycheck Protection Program. So ASAE and its partners are advocating on behalf of associations. So everybody watch for that, to be prepared to apply for that financial aid if needed.
Yeah, and events, unfortunately, I mean, first to get hit, and probably one of the last to come back, right? Because people started closing down early. I remember I was speaking at an event just as it was starting to break out, and that became the theme of the event, right? It was all this is going on. Other events are getting canceled. We got to do elbow bumps instead of shaking hands, and everybody else is like looking to the future, right? And so that was like beginning of March. And everything was basically shut down by mid-March. So before everything else, at least in the U.S., shut down. And now we're all talking about the back end. The lag's going to be longer too.
It is.
Yeah. It's going to take longer to re-engage.
Coming back is one thing I did want to talk about, Sean and Deirdre. So this is a big thing. And when we come back, for association events and conventions especially, I identify one time during a convention that's called, I call it the hug and kiss event, right? Yeah. Because it's a year. Hello, yeah, exactly. My best friend once a year. It's so good to see you. All right. And so that's going to be even more important. Even if we're doing it at a distance, we still need to have the hug and kiss events, even if it's bump and wave, right? And so planners who are looking at their conventions post-COVID need to build in extra time for that, I believe. You need to have time to decompress, to talk about this, to share stories, to share joys and concerns. I don't think it would behoove, well, it might, but I think it would be better to just allow that time. So maybe your opening event is your first thing, or your keynote speaker is your first thing. Maybe if your keynote speakers from 2 to 3, invite everybody to come at 1:15 to 2, just to mingle and
that's right,
and connect, and and then maybe the keynote speaker can be the one who says, let's come back together and let's talk about this. Let's see how we recovered, how we're handling this. And so don't make any elephants in the room. Make sure that you're talking about what we just been through. Affirm everybody, and go from there, so that you're kind of like easing back in. You're not just diving back into what used to be.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for that, and definitely having that conversation. And like you say, a lot of people come because of the connection, right? That's why we all want to go to meetings. Right. That's why I speak at meetings, is I want to speak because I want to connect with the audience, right? And further their goals and further my business goals. And so I think we need to think differently about how the connection happens, right? It is now going to be something where you may need to space it out, right? You can't just walk somebody in the room and have 400 people mob them. I've seen that happen at conferences, right? You bring a celebrity or semi-celebrity out and everybody runs in there and starts asking questions. That's done.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd have to question whether bringing a celebrity or semi-celebrity would fulfill objectives that need to be fulfilled immediately. Now, if the association has this as a regular practice,
Yeah.
and it would be missed, but
Yeah, well, like
I just,
a lot of business conferences, they'll bring in like a business celebrity, right? Somebody
you're right.
who's made a big
Right.
business, and they're like, hey, they're going to talk to you about lessons they learned and everything
Sure.
else. It's usually
Sure.
like part of the pomp and circumstance
Yeah.
of the event. You
Yeah.
may still be able to bring the celebrity in, but you're going to have to structure it much differently because you can't just have
Mhm.
everybody mob them and,
Yeah.
ask
Well, I
for
think
selfies or whatever.
I think what people are going to look for, and in regards to the speakers, is we've all, let's say, been off work, and it'll be a long time, and people are just going to want to get down to business,
Mhm.
and so it having the, as Sean said, having the speaker related or relatable to what the association may be going through at
At
this
least
time.
address it.
That's right. Let's address it. Let's look at, okay, where do we go from here?
Mhm.
And I love like the hug and kiss time period, because that's going to happen. And even if you do it like on day one, which is registration day, the only problem is not everybody shows up for registration on day one. They'll
Right.
show up the morning of a keynote or the
Yeah.
afternoon of your keynote. So it is really important to allow people that opportunity to connect. And we all know that associations, because we're a member of SPIN, Dana and I,
Mhm.
is that, you're right. I mean, I haven't seen this person for a year,
I know.
Yeah.
so you need to have that connection. And I'm hoping that when we do get back, that those connections aren't lost because of what we've all been through.
I think the connections are still there. It's just we got to think about format, right? Like you're going
Right.
to want to, particularly like this, right? So if you're keeping up with people virtually, you're in an industry group, you're talking a little bit throughout the year, you know each other, you're going to want to see each other. You're going to chat. It's just you probably can't do it at a cocktail party where everybody's mixing and mingling and you talk for 10 minutes. You're probably going to have to change the timing allocation so people can have actual time to catch up.
And also, associations are going to need to address the loss that they've experienced with deaths, with members who have died because of the COVID. And so that needs to be added at some point into the consideration moment of silence or a memory wall or something like that. Some associations, for example, nursing homes, their members are the people who are on the front line. And I know one association already said 10 members died already, and they were probably frontline workers, but they were members of the association of the nursing homes that are members. So there's going to be people. The first death that I heard of, an acquaintance of a leader in association that I used to work for, no more, right? It's like, so there's this void that also needs to be recognized, I think.
Yeah, I think you've raised several points for programming, right? So, you need to address the needs of the association. The members now have different needs. You've got to reset the culture of your association. You've got to have these hug and kiss, or whatever we want to call them, moments in a different format. And then now you also need to address the loss, right? Whether it's financial loss, the business loss, the loss of actual people from the illness. There's a lot there that needs to be worked into the agenda.
Right.
I think one of the other things that I'd like you to touch on, Dana, is the sponsorships.
Sure. And I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about the challenges we faced even before COVID. So help me remember that, with associations not necessarily being prepared for the next generation. So I want to talk about that too. But for sponsorships, so in associations, there are many sponsors who just give us money. It's just wonderful. They just sponsor because it's the right thing to do, and they've done it forever, and they have the resources. And we are so grateful for those sponsors. And I would think that those sponsors are going to be exactly the same. Their dollar amount might have to change, but I don't see sponsors like those abandoning completely. All right.
Yeah.
And then there's the sponsors who are sponsors just because you're in their backyard. You know, that would be maybe for national associations that travel around. And so when you're in Dallas, you have all of the, you know, suppliers from Dallas are sponsors. Okay. And then you have exhibitors. Okay. So I put these all under a partner category. And so you have exhibitors, and everybody calls them something else. But in my world, I define them as partners. So you've got sponsors, exhibitors, anybody who buys advertising, who supports financially your events. And so ideally, your sponsorship is designed so that each of those entities' marketing objectives can be met. Some people just give the money and say, put this on the awards banquet or whatever. That's fine. But this is a time where creativity comes back in, and you ask the sponsor, how can your marketing message get to our members now? What can we do with you to make sure that they know you're there and this is what they can do for you? Right. And it could be an annual sponsorship. I partnered with one association that all of their sponsorships are annual, and then the benefits come with each of their meetings. Maybe that's what we do now. Maybe if you're doing regional, then you get sponsors just for the regional meetings, things like that. I think you can have a lot of fun with it too. You know, so a sponsor could create a survival kit that gets mailed to the members or something, you know, whatever that means. But being creative and giving them exposure outside of the meeting is going to have to happen, because in associations, for the most part, we really need those sponsors. We really do.
Well, it's probably, you know, as I'm sitting here having random brainstorms in my head, you know, it's probably prime time. It's probably prime time for sanitation sponsors, right? I mean,
that's what I'm thinking.
Sanitation companies have done well. You know, they're out there. They've got money in their pockets. They're gaining market share. And if you're going to be sanitizing the place, well, they want exposure. Right. They want people that are at the event to take the sanitation products back to their businesses and back to wherever they are. So it's probably probably your prime targets right now.
Well, I consulted with a convention and visitors bureau, and I said, this is when you go buy your bottle of sanitizing gel. You know, when
put your logo on it,
your little one, put your logo on, and say, welcome to fill in the blank of the city. We're glad you're here. You know, wash your hands, love us, XOXO.
Right. But then you also get whoever made it to kick in a discount or give it to you possibly for free or whatever, because you're going to say, this is the brand of hand sanitizer you're going to like or love, or it's better for your hands or whatever.
And you have to, although there's going to be many things that are going to change, like I said, I think you and Heather were talking about that. You two and Heather were talking about this last time, is history is going to make no difference. Okay. So this is like when those of us who were planning during the recession, 2008, 2009, and, you know, okay, once that passed, history didn't go beyond that. It didn't go before that. You know, we only looked at history since 2010 and
That's right.
You know, same thing here. So we can't look at history to do contracts, to do planning. But we can look at our members, and in many ways, our members are still going to be the same people. They're going to have different challenges. They may have different constraints or different needs, but they're still going to be the same people who are trying to do a good job in providing the service, making this product.
I think everybody needs to re-engage with the members, because they are largely going to be the same people, but like you say, their business jumped, right? Their business didn't go back to where it was before either. So you're not going back to where you were either, but neither are your members.
No.
Right? They're in a different place.
Right. But I'm afraid of executive committees or decision makers not talking, how we started at the top of the conversation, not asking them and saying, here's what we need. Well, associations aren't into industries. They're not, you know, whatever. We know from the association, but we still have to go back to our members and ask.
Absolutely. I think that's where the good information is, right? They're going to tell you they're going to tell you what they need. They're going to tell you what challenges they have, so you can really tune it in.
Yeah. And ask specifically, what can your association do for you? The other thing that I was mentioning that still is out there is that so many association meetings haven't grown or been reinvented or redesigned to meet changing needs just because of the generation and the times.
Yeah.
And that still exists. And this is one of these I told you so moments, which people don't want to do, but the associations that haven't prepared to have the next generation ready for leadership, I think they might be even farther behind now, because first of all, they're scrambling to figure out what's a virtual meeting, perhaps, but also this is the time where those that have good resources and are prepared can say, hello, next generation. Hello, different people. We're here for you. Help us rebuild. Help us help you go to the next step. And the next step might be entering September, as a whole entity. But then it's going to go, like you said before in your interview, Sean, this is not now only. We're looking at 21, 22.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying some of the social distancing, other things are going to continue into 22. That's a long planning window. If you say, hey, we can't even think about being where we were January 1, 2020 to at least mid 2022. That's a long window of change.
Yeah. And I'm not even thinking of social distancing. I'm just thinking about having the resources again.
Well, the money,
to come back and just be able to go to meetings again, right?
The money, the pricing, the cost structure, which, like I say, has been a common theme. It seems like everything we hit upon is probably going to cost more to do events, right? So that and that changes the economics. That changes the whole structure.
Well, and I think with so many companies right now doing the telecommuting, and they're working at home, where many companies are like, no, it's not in the cards. We're not going to be doing this. This was before COVID-19. Now they've got, let's say, 60% of their staff is now working from home. That's going to change the environment. And I think that what is going to happen is that, not only associations, but corporate is going to look at their business model and how to reassess that business model to actually work with technology the way we are right now, and making that technology work, but yet also engaging people on that personal level.
Right. And we need to make sure planners have a seat at that table. Don't let those conversations go on, over up there in the C-suite. Invite yourself in, bring donuts for everybody and say, hey, what are we talking about today? I mean,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's one of the things we talked about too. You don't want to make the mistake of letting the platform control it. And I think that's part of what's happening now. Without a good planner, without somebody asking the right questions, talking about goal orientation, your platform, and Deirdre and I have a whole segment coming up on this, but if you pick the platform first and then try to build your events and your connections around that, you've put it backwards, right? You need to figure out what connections you need, what you want to look like, and then find the platform that works with that, right? You need to marry the two together, right? So you don't want to just pick a random platform and go with it. You want to pick the right platform that fits your goals and objectives.
Because a bad live event is not going to be a good virtual event, and vice versa.
Right. Exactly.
Bad is bad. And for those planners who are considering virtual, there are best practices for virtual. They're not that different from live. And I invite you to really research before you just open up Zoom and say, we're going to have a meeting. Because there are ways to create an experience virtually, just like there are ways to create an experience live.
Right. And tomorrow, speaking of virtual, tomorrow we actually are chatting with Patty Stern.
Excellent.
In regards to virtual events. And that's at 2 p.m. tomorrow. So they all flow. And I agree with you in regards to the virtual events and the conferences, because it's the expectation when you have a good conference and you're tying in the virtual component, the expectation is that that virtual component is going to be as good or better quality-wise, because it is virtual, than your conference itself.
Yeah, because to escape a virtual conference, all you have to do is click.
Click, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and like exactly, people don't even know you left until somebody looks at a report later and says, "Oh, they clicked."
That's right. And what you've got to do with if your continuing education is virtual, and we did talk about this the other day as well.
Yeah.
If your continuing education is virtual, how do you build that component in to it whereby, especially on the medical side, where they want their CEs, they need their CEs. So you're going to have to make sure that they were paying attention. So you're going to have to do a sporadic exam at the end that covers the, let's say, the 45 minutes of that virtual program.
After you confirm that the discipline accepts virtual learning, I've been talking to somebody who's in the plumbing association, and it's not approved. Virtual learning for plumbers is not approved. And so that was the first thing they did, because you have to have these CEs. The first thing they did was advocate to get that changed.
Okay, good.
And you're gonna get a lot of temporary waivers. I can tell you on the legal side, we have that. I'm licensed in multiple U.S. states. Some of the states require that we go to in-person continuing ed. Some don't. And the ones that do require in-person, some of them have already come out and said, okay, we're going to waive it at least for a period of time, right? For this reporting cycle or the next reporting cycle, you won't have to, you can do it virtually. So, there may be here a window of opportunity as we're, because we want to focus on the future and opportunity. That's kind of the theme we're trying to come up with. For some of you who are touching upon continuing education credits, there may be a great opportunity to branch out to people who weren't doing stuff in this manner and letting them get their hours, and it's a new marketing opportunity for you.
Sure. Well, and with the Plumbers Association, I'm going to just say it's a biennial, and their deadline was the 30th of this month. So. And
they still didn't relax it?
I don't know. That's one of the things that we're looking at.
Okay.
When I talked to the planner, it was to get approval for virtual and to either extend the deadline or something like that. But having worked in an association that requires CEs for different professionals, people get the 80% of them. Some people get the 80% of them in the last 6 weeks. So.
Oh yeah, that's a very common cultural thing. Sure. People love, and some people plan. I will go to the conference in April, and I'll get my CE hours. I'll be done on April 30th. Right? That's part of the culture.
Oh, we plan it that way, Sean.
Yeah, exactly.
We know that this professional needs 20 in 2 years, and so we make sure that there's 20 at every convention.
You line up.
I'm interested, and we can keep talking, but I'm interested in planners who are listening to use the chat room to pose questions or challenges you're facing, especially from people outside of the meeting department, like from execs or members or whatever, so that we know what kind of things they're facing.
Yeah, so feel free to chime in on that. We'd love to hear what challenges specifically you're seeing, because that's great. And I think one thing, Deirdre and I will be talking about in tomorrow's segment with Patty is, setting expectations is so important, right? So we can't, if we're dealing with people, particularly check writers, we have to say, hey, if we're using a virtual event for a bridge, or we're going back to a smaller live event or a different format of live event, now we have to we have to update our expectations, right? We can't we can't say the world changed because of COVID-19 and events will never be the same and expect the same outcomes, right? We now have to reset.
Right. But I'm very fortunate. I don't have meeting clients. And so I'm not here losing a whole bunch of income because so many conventions have been canceled.
Right.
But so I'm in a position where, my creative little brain is just running 100 miles an hour thinking, what if? And so this is why I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to connect and just share and say, keep thinking, be creative, but always with your members in mind. If you have the greatest idea, but nobody likes it, it's not a great idea. It might be to me.
Yes, exactly.
We have one question is, what are ways to determine what content speakers are good for virtual conferences?
I would just vet those like any other vetting, in that you would ask them for their experience in speaking. Ideally, they'd have experience speaking virtually, but it's going to be new for a lot of people. And so I did attend a webinar on how to improve virtual meetings. And one is have a practice session, and so that people come into it and they know what they're getting. And the person needs to be able to convey the energy without having an audience in front of him or her, and be able to keep people engaged. And so if they're bad doing that live, they're going to be worse doing it virtually, I would think.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say from a speaker front, yeah, there are definite differences. I do both virtual and live. There are definitely differences. One thing that's very important with virtual, if you are thinking about bringing virtual speakers in, is your platform again becomes very important, right? So live stage, most people are familiar with it. There's ways to get audiences engaged. When you're doing a virtual event, you gotta work with your speaker and figure out what capabilities you have as far as people asking questions, chiming in. How is that going to work? It makes a big difference in how the event comes out in the end, because we like to have interaction. At least I do. I like to talk with my audience, and virtually some platforms allow that pretty easily, some don't. And so your platform is also an important part of it. It's not just the speaker. It's like having your speaker work with the platform you have.
Right, and there'll be a huge, for many speakers, there will be a huge learning curve in regards to presenting virtually, because of the aspect of, it's you're on a camera, and it's making that conversation feel like it's a one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the logistics that go behind, like your lighting, what they need to know, how their presentation is going to run, and everything else. So there's so much that it's going to go into doing the virtual aspects of conferences.
Yeah, you have to assume that you're planning, the steps for planning virtual are going to be the same as the steps for planning live.
Of course.
Don't shortcut it. And
No.
then if this is a platform or a model that you're going to use on a regular basis, I highly recommend researching different companies that do this professionally, and engaging with one that can help you make sure it comes off really well. So that don't just turn on Zoom and say, hey, everybody, let's go talk, but that you make it as professional as you would a live.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about with Patty tomorrow is
sure.
the providers and everything else like that, and the real process for that planning stage.
Yeah. Dana, your wealth of information. Can you just, for people that are watching it, maybe want to connect with you more, check out your stuff. How do they get in touch with you? How do they find you?
My company is called Saul Meeting Consulting, and Saul is S as in Sam, AAL. Hopefully my name's popping up. And I'm online, so it's just saulmeetings.com. And so all my contact information's there, my phone and my email. And I love thinking, I love designing, I love creating, and I love helping planners. So
this is a powerful segment. We're hoping you'll come back and join us again, maybe in a couple of weeks, as we see what's developing. Folks that are joining us, I know we had a good live audience here on Zoom. We'll be doing more of these. Deirdre and I are, out finding who has the information that we think the other people need. We're listening to the feedback. So there was a question. We're posting them on a channel called Best in Events on YouTube. And we're also putting them on Facebook Live over at our Sean McBride. So we're trying to bring this information together for you. So we hope some of you will come back again, bring us your questions, bring your idea. We want to get a community around this and really find some answers to make things better. And Dana, I really appreciate you helping us with that mission today.
Oh, no problem. We share a lot on SPIN, our Senior Planner Industry Network that Deirdre and I are members of. And people are invited to join us. Look at, what is it, Deirdre? Spinplanners.com, something like that.
I think it's spin.
So look for that too, because we're doing a lot of talking amongst ourselves. So there's a lot of platforms and opportunities. So thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Oh, we really appreciate you being here today. Everybody out there, I always ask my audience, pat yourself on the back for doing the hard work and investing in yourself.
Thank you so very much.
Okay.
See you all again very soon.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Sean. Thank you.